Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Natalie Pinto, and I am a member of the Career Services team. And I will be your workshop facilitator for part 2 of our Career Competencies workshop, Articulating Your Career Competencies. In today's workshop, we will review the definition of a career competency again, just to help you refamiliarize yourself to what we discussed in part 1 of the workshop. Then I will ask you to complete the inventory exercise again so that you can compare and contrast your results from the last inventory. Then we will talk about how do we articulate your competencies. We'll look at SAR statements and resumes. We'll also explore interviews and networking. The learning objectives for today's workshop is that by the end of today, you'll be able to review the definition of a competency, complete a skills inventory and reflect on the key differences, learn how to articulate competencies to employers and other professionals, and identify next steps in your career journey. So let's do a review. What is a competency? Do you remember what we talked about the last time you would have seen me for part 1 of the workshop? Take a moment to reflect. In our last workshop, we discussed the definition of a competency. We talked about how competencies and the word skills are often used interchangeably. But competencies are made up of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. We also explored an example from the communication competency. We looked at essay writing, and we talked about how we were discussing essay writing as an example to talk to an employer about to demonstrate our communication competency. We would touch on the knowledge gain from essay writing. So we would talk about the topic that we wrote the essay about, but also about the knowledge of how to write an effective essay. Then we would explore the skills because communication and many of our competencies are quite broad. So you want to break them down into transferable skills. So for essay writing, we might talk about verbal communication because maybe we're taking that essay and developing a presentation from it. And certainly we would talk to our written communication. But we'd also speak to the attitudes or attributes that we also demonstrated while we were undertaking the essay task. We would talk about the professionalism that we use when drafting the essay, and also about knowing our audience, ensuring that employers know that we can write in a formal, professional way, because that's what would be expected of us in the workplace. Now let's complete the inventory exercise again, where you will assess your current level of proficiency with the career competencies that you assessed in part 1 of the workshop. First, you will open the same inventory from last time. So take a moment to locate that inventory document and review the instructions on top of the page to familiarize yourself with how to complete the inventory. For each transferable skill listed, please indicate your level of proficiency in the end of term column. To recap the levels of proficiency again, 1 means no experience, smiley face, and it's okay if at this point you still haven't had experience with a particular skill set within the competency. Knowledge is power. This only just gives you information on the competencies that you'll need to keep developing as you progress throughout your academic journey. All the way to 5. 5 advanced means that, again, you can teach that aspect of the competency to somebody else. After completing the inventory, review your level of proficiencies and reflect on the following. In relation to the course or experience that you just completed this inventory for, reflect on how your proficiencies change from the beginning of the course or the experience and to the end of the course or the experience. And then think about what assignments or tasks you've completed throughout this course or this experience that supported you in your development. It's important to think of specific tasks because when you're describing and articulating your competencies to employers, they're going to want to hear stories about different experiences and tasks and assignments that you've undergone to support you in that development of your competencies. And so really think about specific examples to be able to articulate your competencies to employers and other professionals. Now let's move on to articulating your competencies by exploring SAR statements, which are also known as accomplishment-based statements that we put on our resume. We use SAR statements to show an employer how we have developed our competencies instead of just telling them. Show me, don't tell me. Telling them would just be saying I have developed strong proficiencies in the communication and digital literacy competency, for example, but it could be the other competencies, of course. Showing them would be providing a specific example of how we have developed our competencies, just like the essay writing example we went through earlier. Or maybe you've created a podcast which demonstrates both your communication and digital literacy competency. SAR statements are an effective way to communicate examples of skills and professional experiences on our resume because they allow you to identify the situation, what was the task at hand, the action, what did you do, and the result, what did you accomplish or learn. While SAR stands for situation, action, result, we actually start with the action verb when drafting our statements, not the situation. Using an example from working as a TA, the situation would be worked as a TA for an introductory psychology course, or it could be any course on campus. The action would be led review sessions, graded assignments, and provided academic support to students. The result would be helped improve student exam scores and developed strong teaching and mentoring skills. So how do we take all that information and put it into a SAR statement? We would start with the action. So the action is led review sessions, graded assignments, and provided academic support in an introductory psychology course. That's the situation, which helped improve student exam scores and developed strong teaching and mentoring skills. So let's review some other examples. So again, if we look at that telling versus showing, telling the employer would be just to put on our resume strong leadership skills. But that's not effective because if we were to just put that on our resume, do you think the employer is going to know what we mean? Leadership is so broad. We could be doing tremendous things to be able to demonstrate our leadership competencies. We could be doing a wide variety of things that the employer may not even think of. And we never want them to assume. So instead, we want to provide that example. We want to show them. So our example could be organized, that would be the action verb. A food drive event for the food center, that would be the situation. Raising awareness and collecting over 500 pounds of non-perishable goods to help Carleton community members in need. That would be the result. Another example is strong teamwork skills. That would just be telling the employer about our teamwork abilities. Instead, we want to show them. So we may write a SAR statement like facilitated, that would be the action. Conversations and discussions among team members, that would be the situation, to ensure every deadline from a pre-planned project schedule was met. Let's look at our research skills. Saying strong research skills would just be telling the employer about our skills. Instead, we would put interviewed, that might be the action, subject matter experts over Zoom, that would be the situation, which resulted in collecting primary data for a group research project on the Canadian legal system. And last but certainly not least, let's review communication skills. We wouldn't just put strong communication skills. Instead, we would put an example of how we've demonstrated our communication skills. So an example would be delivered, that would be the action, concise oral presentations to students, professors, and business professionals, that would be the situation, conveying important concepts and learning how to engage different types of audiences. At the start of our SAR statements, we always want to put a strong action verb. We never want to start a SAR statement off with responsible for or duties included. We also don't put I at the start of our SAR statements. SAR statements never have personal pronouns. Some examples of strong action verbs include identified, analyzed, researched, synthesized, led or managed, delegated, collaborated, trained, presented, implemented, coordinated, or promoted. Let's move along to resumes. This is the place where we put those SAR statements. So how do we use SAR statements on our resume? They are great for thoroughly demonstrating the transferability of our skills and competencies, and we often include them in the highlight a qualifications section or the skills profile. Also under experiences, whether they be work experiences, volunteer or extracurricular experiences. SAR can also be a really good framework to use for interview responses. There are different styles of resumes that you could choose to use to articulate your career readiness to an employer. On the screen is our chronological resume template, which is an excellent template to use because it only has one skill category, usually called a highlighted qualifications or skills profile, as you see on the screen here. And it also allows you to include at least one work experience, if not more, on the first page of your resume, if you're doing a 2-page resume. If you want to know more about the merits between a 1-page resume or a 2-page resume, come see us at Career Services. We're happy to explore that with you. The SAR statements are the bullets that you see under the skills profile, the work experience section, and the other sections such as the volunteer experience section, the applied project section, or the extracurricular activities section. Did you know, though, that you could put projects on your resume? Projects are excellent to include on your resume because not only do they demonstrate your competencies, they also show the employer the practicality of the projects that you're doing throughout your academic studies and how they're transferable to a workplace. Often projects that we complete throughout our academic journey mirror projects that take place in the workplace, especially in terms of how they're organized, managed, and executed. This can help you to show your career readiness and suitability for employment experiences that will require you to work on projects. Here is an example of how we would format the applied project section. We would first put the title of the project, then we would put the course title. Avoid using course codes. Employers don't know what they mean. So the course title or the title of the experience that we're doing we're doing the projects for. So that could be like an extracurricular experience or a volunteer experience, or even it could be a project for your workplace, in which case you would put the name of your workplace. You also want to include the date range that you've completed the project in. And then you want to include SAR statements that describe any problems, challenges, technology or technical skills utilized and the results and outcomes. Some skills to consider could be, was there a presentation or paper required? Did you have to work independently or as part of a team? And what sort of technology or software did you use? Here is an example of an applied project. While the example may not be reflective of your particular academic program, it is super transferable. And what I hope you take away is how you format the applied project and different skills and experiences that you could include in your SAR statements. So you see here you would put your position title, so it would be team member or perhaps you were a team leader. You would put the date range, you would put the title of the project, so in this case it's working towards prison reform, and this project took place at Carleton. Then your bullets would say designed and carried out a small research project, which included interviewing members of the Ottawa community to gather data. Another SAR statement could be generated research findings to support the reduction of incarcerated rates, specifically among racialized populations, or communicated through a blog post in an engaging and persuasive way with a non-academic audience to educate the public on Indigenous issues in the prison system. Here is another example. So again, you would put your position title. So in this case, it would be team member. You would put the name of the project, communication skills for engineers, term project. You would put the date range, and then you would put the location, Carleton University, Ottawa, Ontario. Then you would include some SAR statements that describe the key tasks accomplished, the key deliverables, and your key accomplishments. So, for example, this project, there was a research component. You had to produce a detailed report. You had to explain technical concepts orally to non-technical audiences. Pay attention to the word orally used here in the SAR statement. That's demonstrating exactly how you presented and showing your verbal communication skills. And also the creation of multimedia products such as PowerPoint presentations, a blog, and video recordings. Notice it's very specific. It doesn't just say created multimedia products, it speaks specifically to the types of multimedia products and the types of technology used. Let's move on to interviews. It's really important when it comes to interviewing, especially if interviews make you nervous. It's important to remember that the employer would not have invited you to the interview if they did not think you could do the job. So if you are invited to the interview, you're already a winner because the employer would not have invited you if they did not think you could do the job. Well, you might be wondering then, if employers think I can do the job, why do I have to go through the interview process? Well, the interview process is to confirm to the employer that their suspicions are correct, that you are able to do the job, that you have the skill set and the qualifications that they're looking for. But I will tell you from a lot of recent conversations I've had with employers and also employer panels that I've attended, there really is a big emphasis on making sure candidates are going to love the job, that you're actually going to be interested in the job, and that you actually want to work for the employer. And then the other thing that they want to assess is, can they work with you? Will you be a good fit for their team? So they're looking at personality and attitude throughout the interview. But, I know the goal of an interview is for you to get hired, and that the hiring decision is only made by the employer. So sometimes the perception is that the employer has all the power. But you also have power during interviews. It's an opportunity for you to decide whether you want this job. Is this job a good fit for you? Is it offering what you want? And can you do this job? But remember, if you're concerned about whether you can do this job, there is a training period. And so the employer is not expecting you to know everything day one of starting this job. So when you're thinking if you can do the job, remember those pieces that, you may think you can't, but with some training, it's likely that you will be able to do the job. Now, there are different types of interview questions that the employer may ask throughout the interview. Informational questions may be asked, like, tell me about yourself. Behavioral questions are where an employer is asking you to share an example of past behavior as a way of predicting future behavior. So they might say, tell me a time when. Situational questions are when employers may present a scenario and ask how you would react. This is so that they can evaluate your critical thinking skills. Or they may ask you a technical question where they are trying to assess your logic and reasoning and your technical aptitude. Now, let's look at behavioral questions a little bit more closely. As I just mentioned, behavioral questions are often used as they are the best predictor of future behavior. And so some behavioral questions that may be asked are like, describe a situation where you used your communication skills to successfully persuade and influence someone to see your point of view. Or tell us about a mistake you made, what the consequences of that were, and how you rectified the situation or what you learned. Or tell us a time when you worked within a group and things did not go so well. What did you do? And my number one tip for that, if you do get some sort of question asking about conflict management or interpersonal communication, is that it's really important not to throw your teammates under the bus, and always important to lead with empathy and understanding for the other person's situation, while also presenting how you and your team still accomplish the work. Because at the end of the day, even when there is conflict, it's still important to get the job done. So when we are answering behavioral questions, the SAR formula is an excellent technique to use as a framework for how you can talk to your speak to your example. And so we often say, remember, show me, don't tell me, right? So we don't want to say to the employer, well, I've had experience doing this. We instead want to tell them a story about our experience. So, first, we want to start off with the situation. What was the task at hand? So, as you can see on the screen here, I've included some mathematical formulas for each part of the SAR equation. Under the situation, when giving that context, you only want it to be like 30% of your answer. You're really just providing some background information and really painting the scene. Just supporting the employer and being able to picture you in the environment that you're describing, undertaking the task that you're about to discuss in the action part. So, moving on to actions, this is where you're going to describe how you accomplished whatever your example is demonstrating. Think about it from accomplishing it from start to end and the steps in between. That should be 60% of your answer, because the question that the employer is asking, you may not have an example that is 100% relevant to the job that you're applying for or being interviewed for. However, you will have a transferable experience to highlight your transferable skills. So it's where in the action piece that you would actually highlight those transferable skills. So it's most important to the employer that they hear how you accomplish the project or task or whatever it is that you're talking about in your example, because that's the true place where they're going to be able to see past behavior and use it as a predictor to future behavior. And then at the end, results. What did you accomplish or learn? So what went well, maybe what didn't go well, what would you have changed in the future? That should be like 10% of your answer. So again, situation, 30%, action, 60%, the bulk of your answer, and then results. What did you accomplish or learn? Moving on to networking. What is networking? How would we define networking? Well, networking is not asking for a job, which I know seems so counterintuitive to the purpose of networking. I know a lot of us, we network because we eventually want a job, but that's not actually the case. Networking is an excellent opportunity for building relationships with professionals in industries or organizations in your area of interest or in areas that will help to support you in meeting your career goals. Networking is excellent for career research. It doesn't have to just be used to get a job. And oftentimes we network online through LinkedIn or by attending events like career and networking fairs. Or really, networking can take place anywhere. It can take place in your classrooms and your extracurricular activities or volunteer experiences and your paid employment experiences. It can even take place at social gatherings on a Saturday night. An elevator pitch is a short, persuasive summary, typically 30 to 60 seconds long, that clearly communicates who you are, what you do, and what you're looking for or offering. It's called an elevator pitch because it should be concise enough to deliver during a brief elevator ride. Often includes what you're studying, so your degree program, when you're expected to graduate, your career interests, your key skills and strengths, and a question to keep the conversation going. So, what are some questions that you should ask during a networking opportunity? So, you could ask the person that you're networking with some questions about themselves, like what part of the job do you find most satisfying and challenging? What qualities or abilities are important for being successful in this position? How did you prepare yourself for this kind of role? Or on a typical day, what do you do? You could ask them questions about the field. How did you get started in your current position? Is there a typical career path in this field? What would an entry level job be? And I really like that question because that really helps us with our career research and helps us to prepare for employment post graduation. And I also really love the question, how do you see this position or field changing in the future? Because this helps us to be strategic with our learning throughout the remainder of our academic journey. We may also choose to ask them for some advice. So, for example, we may ask, is there any advice you'd give someone entering the field? What are some things about this field you wish you knew when you were in university? I really like that question because I wish I had asked that question of others when I was in university. And then also, you could totally ask an employer, is there anyone else you'd recommend I chat with? And so now that we've explored identifying and articulating your career competencies, let's talk about the next steps in your career journey. Be strategic. Practice makes progress. So it's really important. You want to be strategic within your learning and development to help you to become career ready throughout your university education. This will also allow you to practice articulating your competencies by updating your resume, attending interviews, or through networking with employers and other professionals. Again, practice makes progress. There's no perfection in career development. So practice makes progress in your career readiness. So, some strategies for you to consider moving forward. As you progress through your academic journey, identify more transferable skills and examples to support them. Remember, those examples are key. Your resume is a living document, so continuously update it with STAR statements to reflect the skills gained from each new experience. Connect with us at Career Services for support with how to transfer your SAR statements into SAR stories for your next interview or even to be able to share in your next networking experience. And share your competencies while networking with employers. Please do not hesitate to connect with us for further support with your career development. Remember, we are located in 41 Torrey, and you can book appointments with us through your My Success account. You can also engage with us by visiting our website, sending us an email, giving us a phone call, by checking out our social media accounts, and by using the live chat on our website. Thank you very much for participating in this workshop. I wish you continued success in your academic journey and wish you all the best in reaching your career goals. Thank you so much. Bye now.